And for those who enjoy this channel and would love to support us financially, please feel free to hit that donate link. We'd greatly appreciate it. God bless.
Taylor opened up about the inches movements of the mountains. Is it vertical or horizontal?
Both.
Both? Which part is the horizontal?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy, if you want to elaborate on that a little bit there. Did you want to answer Taylor's section of that?
Do you know the inches per second movement is also predicted by our model?
It doesn't matter. You can predict that the sun will come up.
Sorry?
You can predict that the sun will come up too.
No. Please stick with the mountains. Do you know we also predicted that the mountains are moving inches per second as leftover remnants of the once massive catastrophic plate tectonics during the flood?
Yeah, so if two models predict the same thing, you have to look at the pattern of their predictions.
Okay, tell me your pattern. So, for example, you talk about mountains, right? So let's focus on the mountains. How did the Andes form, for example?
I'm not a geologist, so I don't know.
So why do you say the inches per second if you're not a geologist? How can you not explain the simple basics of these?
Because geologists have said this.
All right. Are you familiar? Okay, let's move away from the Andes. Let's go to the Himalayas. Do you have any idea how it formed?
I have the basic idea that continents collide.
Okay, please tell me, my Taylor. How?
Yeah, I have the basic idea that two continents, two rock formations moving towards each other will basically collide and pile up at the center between each other.
Which continent in the Tibetan Plateau? Which two continents are collided? Which
I don't
plates?
know the names of them. I don't know the names of them. Doesn't matter.
These are the basics. You said you know the basics. Why do you not know the two plates that you are referring to? But let me tell you what it is.
I do know the basics, but I don't know the names of them. I know basically how mountains form. So why don't you educate me how geologists are wrong?
I'm not saying they're wrong. I never said they're wrong. I never said they're wrong. Okay? It is the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate that collided. Okay? Now, let me give you a little a scenario here. The Tibetan Plateau in the Eurasian continent is the highest. Is the roof of the world. The highest mountains in the world are there. Okay, including Mount Everest. Now, imagine two cars colliding at a slow speed. Would it buckle or not?
Mm-hmm.
Would it buckle or not? If two cars collide with weak speed, limited speed, not full speed, would they buckle or not? Would they buckle like this or not?
It depends on the force and the angle applied.
Yeah, like I said, the force is weak. Okay. Now, when you look at the Tibetan Plateau in the Eurasian plate, in the border of China and somewhere in Bhutan or Nepal, it looks like a catastrophe buckled it the way it is. When you look at it at space, it even looks like a huge bruise. It's like something so strong, which is the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate collided to buckle the entire, to raise up the entire Tibetan Plateau, including the Himalayas and Mount Everest. So how could the evolutionary snail-paced plate tectonics achieve the Himalayas? How can they create the Himalayas if their movements in your standard plate tectonics are only so slow? Because standard plate tectonics is only inches per year, like you said, and I know about that. Because so how could a slow collision create such a massive Tibetan Plateau and a massive Mount Everest and Himalayas?
Because clearly you don't understand the physics. If something as massive as a continent is moving at any speed at all, really, it's going to be billions of joules of force. So
yes, But if, yeah, I know, I understand that. So let's say using your plate tectonic model, okay, inches per second, two of these continents are about to collide inches per second. Okay, so because of its inches per second speed, which is limited, it should only ride the Tibetan Plateau and the Himalayas, because of its limited speed of collision, should only rise about, let's say, 10,000 feet at maximum. But they are more than 10,000 feet. So it means a catastrophic plate tectonics instead was the cause of the Tibetan Plateau, which is from the biblical global flood.
The real issue when it comes to the movement of the continents and how you can show that speed was involved, that it happened at a rapid pace and not this inch-long process of uniformitarianism, the rate your fingernails grow, is by showing the subduction. We have massive slabs of continental crust that have been thrust underneath other slabs. Now, the mantle of the Earth is extremely dense. You're not going to shove ever so slowly a slab of material down deep into the Earth, all the way down into the mantle, approaching the core of the outer core of the Earth at the rate your fingernails grow. It ain't ever going to happen. And on top of that, they have used seismology to measure density of rock, various subducted plates that have been thrust down deep into the Earth, one plate going under the other. And they've discovered that the density is related to how much water and what the temperature of that slab of Earth crust is. And what they find is that there is a tremendous difference in temperature between slabs that have been subducted down into the mantle and the mantle itself. The mantle begins at about 1600 degrees. Whoo! And it gets hotter the deeper you go. Now, here's the thing. If that slab of meat had been shoved down into the Earth millions and millions and millions of years ago, it should have been heated up by the incredible temperatures that's down there. So to find these massive slabs of continental crust that have been thrust down into the mantle to still be so remarkably cool verifies that it cannot have been millions of years ago that continental crust was thrust down in there, else it would have heated up by now. So the difference in temperature is profound evidence that the movement of the continental plates during the Noahic flood was rapid indeed. It could not have been slow. Secondly, another important thing is, since the mantle isn't so incredibly dense, think about this. You've all heard stories about a tornado can take a piece of straw and shove it into a 2x4 because of the crazy speed of it moving, the wind, right? And that can happen. A tornado can pick up a piece of straw and shove it right into a 2x4. Now, if you try pushing that piece of straw slowly into that 2x4, it ain't going to happen. It's not going in. It's just going to beckle. The 2x4 is vastly too dense for that piece of straw. It just break. But if you get that piece of straw moving at 2,100 miles per hour, it will pierce right into the 2x4. The same thing is true with a slab of crust being thrust into the Earth, down into the Earth. At the rate your fingernails grow, there is no way that a slab of continental crust is going to do anything but ride right underneath the other slab. It's not going to point down, curve down, and go down into the mantle. It's too dense. The deeper you go into the Earth, the more gravity is making it harder and denser. It's not something to penetrate that requires exponentially greater force. So the only reason these slabs of continental crust could even be curved down, go whoosh right down into the Earth, is if they were moving at phenomenal speed and had tremendous amount of energy behind them. Because at the rate that your fingernails grow, it will never happen. All you would ever get is one continental plate riding along underneath another, and the other taking a ride on top of the other, and they'd be like two blankets, one on top of each other. But that's not what we see. We see these massive amounts of continental crust thrust under the other, and then they curve down, go almost straight down in some cases, right through into the mantle. That density, it can only happen because the mantle is moving, the crust is moving fast, like the straw, When it's moving fast enough, it'll penetrate the 2x4. But at the rate your fingernails grow, you will never get that slab of material to go down into the mantle. So the temperature difference and where we find them demonstrates the continental crust had to be moving at very high speed in order for this to take place. At the rate your fingernails grow, it could never, ever happen.
Well, exactly. I just want to touch on one thing before you end there, because that model, based on the fact that the Bible describes the fountains of the great deep breaking open like like an eggshell. The earth is fractured like an eggshell, and these continents are moving vertically and horizontally. So that's a very powerful explanation for how the cold, rigid crustal plates, like you're talking about, could have moved thousands of miles over the mantle while the ocean floor subducted. But an important part to take from this as well is this model predicts relatively slower and little plate movement today because that continental sprint. So we don't look to a continental drift, we look to a continental sprint, would have rapidly decelerated when all this pre-flood ocean floor that Neff's talking about was actually subducted. And one last thing, you know, the waters that erupted from the interconnected worldwide subterranean chambers that we're talking about here when the fountains of the Great Deep broke open, they would have had an energy release exceeding the explosion of 300 trillion hydrogen bombs. Wow. So all of these things considered, I mean, it's amazing confirmation of the global flood. What were you going to say there, Neff?
Oh, nothing. I was chuckling when you said the release of these nuclear bombs, because that's exactly it. It was cataclysmic.
Yeah,
it
they
was
underestimated
tremendous in power. The amount of energy it was released was absolutely phenomenal, and that's why we see massive slabs of mantle being shoved in. You mentioned something that I didn't say: cold crust being shoved down into hot crust. Cold is denser, harder than the hot stuff. That's another reason it was able to get shoved down in there, and only because it happened so fast. If it was shoved down into the mantle at the rate your fingernails grow, it would heat up literally as it's being pushed down into it. And in other words, it would melt right into the rock itself, the mantle itself. It would become part of the mantle. But that's not what we see. We see the slab is separate, it's colder, and it's harder, and it's shoved down into the mantle. That can't be unless it happened rapidly. It's just impossible.
Standing for truth, and Neff forgot to mention one crucial thing about these slabs. This is a testable prediction by creationists in 1994, and in 1997 was verified.
Right. It's the seismic data from NASA that revealed the enormous slabs of cool rock under North America. So down in the core itself, which should be warm, this is a testable confirmation of flood geology. Let's give Taylor, and it looks like there's another gentleman here, Jeremy as well, a few minutes or whatever they want to respond to what we just said, because it seems like all evidence points to the Genesis flood as being a true record of history. And we've also provided a testable prediction. There's also another testable prediction that maybe Jeremy can get into after about, I think it's magnetic reversals, but let's give you guys a chance to respond. I think you're muted there, Taylor.
Yeah.
What about? Go ahead, Jeremy. The other Jeremy. Is he here?
Yeah. Oh no, it's the other Jeremy. There's I think. Are you an atheist, Jeremy? I'm not sure.
Maybe he's away.
He might be away, or I'm not too sure if.
I want Taylor to address my Himalayas thing.
Actually, Taylor, if you want to address, what Jeremy said or what I said, what Neff said, and give, what you believe is a rebuttal to that, and then we can touch on your rebuttal. Go ahead.
So I found it difficult to follow what Nephilim was saying about, because he kept saying that the continental crust can't go down to the earth, and he said it would go down into the earth, and it can't. I guess it can't go down slowly because it melts, but that's precisely what happens. It needs
No,
time
no,
to
no,
melt.
Taylor, there's a
let me
scientific term.
respond to that.
It's called the runaway subduction. It's a scientific
So
runaway subduction. It is possible.
Taylor, the point is this: if the slabs of continental crust were pushed down into the mantle, if one was pushed under the other at the rate your fingernails grow, which is at the rate the continents are moving today, right? Because the mantle is denser than the continental crust, the lithosphere above it, one would simply go, it's going to follow the path of, a lot of things follow the path of least resistance, right? Water runs downhill, etc., right? Air, hot air and cold air, they do this the same. So if the mantle is denser, harder to penetrate than the crust, which is softer, pushing one slab of continental crust up under the other is not going to push it at the rate your fingernails grow down into something that's denser. The slab is going to choose the path of least resistance, and it's going to simply go underneath the one above it that's being pushed under. But it won't go down into the mantle, because the mantle, the gravity of the earth, the further down into the earth you go, the harder and more dense the earth gets, because of quadrillions, quadrillions of tons of matter squeezing and pressing. At 1 mile down into the earth, if I remember the calculations, the pressure inside the earth is 64,000 pounds per square inch at a mile down. No, 10 miles down. 10 miles down, 64,000 pounds, 1,000 pounds per square inch. So if that it's not going to, if it's following the path of least resistance, it's not going to go down into the densest part of the earth. It's going to ride one plate right up on top of the other, like pulling a blanket over on top of another blanket. See, that's all it would do. Now, secondly, the other thing is, instead of just slowly going down into the mantle, what we find is they go under a little ways, and then all of a sudden they curve dramatically and just go phew, almost straight down into the mantle. Now, that's what we would expect at high velocity. When things like that encounter tremendous resistance, they bend and curve, and it would just go shoop, take a different direction and dive like that. So that's another evidence. And then the third is the temperature difference is so great. The mantle crust that's been shoved down into the mantle, where it shouldn't be because it's so dense compared to the crust that's being pushed down into it, it's denser. How do you push a nail into a piece of titanium with a hammer? You're not going to do it. But we've got this continental crust, which is softer by a long shot, oceanic crust being shoved down into the densest part of the earth. And yet the temperature is vastly cooler. Now, if you're pushing a giant slab of material from the earth down into something that is at minimal 1600 degrees and going up from that when you go down, wouldn't it heat up at an incredible rate? I mean, does it take 10 million years or 100 million years for that slab to achieve the same temperature as the material it's going down into? It can't. Not at the rate your fingernails grow. If it'd been pushed down in there at that rate, there's no way this tremendous temperature difference would exist. See, so these are three profound evidences. The fact that it went down there, the fact that the temperature is so great, and the fact that it curved dramatically because it met horrific resistance and just shot straight down. Those three things are I would almost liken them to empirical evidence that the continents had to have been moving at very high speed when that took place. It cannot have happened at the uniformitarian rates, which is the rate your fingernails grow. That's nonsense. Can't be.
Well, I think it all comes down to the fact that when we look at the geology of the earth, present processes that we know, they can't explain what we see. Rather, what we see points to catastrophic processes, as we've been talking about in the past, which is confirmation of Noah's flood. I mean, contorted rocks would indicate mass folding of soft sediments. And one last thing I wanted to point out before Taylor gives a rebuttal here is the result of the runaway subduction of the cold ocean floor slabs that we're expounding upon here. They would have suddenly cooled the mantle temperature at the core mantle boundary. And that would greatly accelerate convection and heat loss from the adjacent outer core. So this rapid cooling of the surface of the core would result in, here's another testable prediction on top of the cool slabs, because the result would be rapid reversals of the Earth's magnetic field. And the thing is, these rapid reversals in continental lava flows have actually been discovered. And Jeremy and myself were just talking about this the other day as well, because a lot of times we go into the prediction of the cool slabs, but this is another strong prediction in regards to the very rapid magnetic reversal. So I mean, there's just so much evidence that points right to the Genesis flood. There's actually testable predictions that are being confirmed. It just seems like it all comes down to 2 Peter 3 that talks about in the last days there's going to be people denying the world that then was being overflowed with water perish, because that's what all the evidence points to. Go ahead.
So you said that young Earth creationists predicted the seismic data when NASA came out with the numbers. So wouldn't that be NASA predicting it and doing the work, and then you just kind of retrofitted it to fit the Bible?
It was predicted in 1994 by Dr. John Baumgartner of, I forgot his organization. Then
The
3
Bible,
years
right?
later, sorry?
I'm sorry,
With
go
the
ahead. I thought you
Bible
finished.
or with an actual scientific model?
Yes, it's predicted by the catastrophic plate tectonics model. This is the continents, right, Taylor? This is the pre-flood ocean floor. The subduction, zoom, like this.
That's right.
Yes, like
That's
this.
exactly right.
Going down all the way to the mantle core boundary. That's it. This is the model, catastrophic plate tectonics.
And yet we see them moving slowly at this current day.
Sorry?
We see
There
the tectonics moving slowly this current day.
Yeah,
yes,
but that snail-like movement of the plates, as Jeremy was talking about earlier, that's not going to be able to explain, like present-day processes, what we see today can't explain the geologic features that we see. Like Jeremy, remember you were talking about, was it the Himalayas you were talking about that you wanted Taylor to address? Did you want to reiterate that there, Jeremy?
Yes. So Taylor, what do you say about the Himalayas?
Nothing. I just have to say that a magic catastrophe doesn't explain anything.
But we make predictions, right? You accept testable predictions and verified predictions, correct? And
show me how that model predicted the seismic data. I mean, like, I'm not just going to take your word for it.
I already showed you the technicalities of it. Pre-flood.
No, I don't know what the. Excuse me. I don't know what the seismic data is.
The seismic data reveals that there is an abnormal temperature variation between different mantle rocks. At first, they assumed these were mantle rocks, but later on, because of their temperature differences, they infer finally that these are cool slabs instead of those typical mantle rocks. These are not typical mantle rocks. These are actually rocks found on the surface of the Earth today. So it means there was a subduction that happened in the past.
I'm good.
And evolutionists love the uniformitarianism, right? And as we know, there are 6 mega sequences of rock layers worldwide. These rock layers, 6 mega sequences, are sedimentary, correct? So if uniformitarianism geology is true, why are we not seeing sedimentary rock layers formed today? That's another thing.
We do.
And I recall you opened up about the rock, the order of the fossils, right? That is actually very easy to explain if you read our model. Okay, let me. I won't ask you anymore. So let's do a more or less explanation here. What is at the bottom layer? Okay, okay, let 6 mega sequences. First 3 layers from the bottom to the third layer, mostly marine, predominantly marine features, right? Marine creatures and shallow marine creatures that live on the beaches or whatever it's called. Sorry for my English. Okay, first 3 layers, and the above, then the last 3 layers from the dinosaur to the human. Okay, those are land creatures. Correct. Now the Bible said that the global flood, started in the oceans. Okay, through catastrophic plate tectonics. So, if the flood started in the oceans, would it not be logical to assume that the flood would also bury marine creatures first, in the first 3 layers? Okay, and after those,
I have. There's a lot of
yes,
problems with that. So, where is the flood coming from? Is it coming from the rain? Is it coming from the
uh,
earth?
Well,
Is
there
it
are
when
just
the fountains of the
magically
great deep broke
appearing?
open, the majority of the, yeah, if you want to expound on that, Jeremy, I'm surprised you're not aware that, we look to the fountains of the great deep, those subterranean chambers. I kind of expounded on that earlier, on how those would have shot up. That's where the great majority of the flood water would have come from. Did you want to touch on that, Jeremy?
flood. Okay, we have multiple sources of the waters or material that Taylor is talking about. Okay, first, like the Bible said, the fountains of the great deep burst out. Okay, so it's underwater. It's the materials that came out were from underneath the earth. So what's underneath the earth? Magma and water. Now, this water also has been predicted by creationists. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, it is not the CPT model that predicted this. It is the hydroplate theory that predicted this. And as a fulfilled prediction, the fulfilled prediction of this is the Beijing anomaly. You can type it right now, Google it, Taylor. The Beijing anomaly, which we find a huge body of water inside the earth. Okay, so the fountains of the great deep burst out, was magma coming out and water at the same time. So both water and magma. Okay? And if you ask where the water came from, the Bible also said that God put water inside the earth during creation. I don't know why he did it, but but we verified this in science already as a testable and already verified prediction. So magma and water were the mechanisms that came out of the. That's the answer to your question. And when you want me to expound, when this water came out and magma, this magma would push, okay, magma, okay, most of the magma would go upwards, and many of them would also go horizontally. And when it goes vertically, it will push the pre-flood ocean crust. Okay, it will push the pre-flood ocean crust and make contact with the continents. The pre-flood ocean crust is this. This is the continent. They're like this, and when the magma pushes the pre-flood ocean crust, it will subduct. The pre-flood ocean, like Neff was talking about, it will subduct. Okay, and these magma from inside the earth will then replace the pre-flood ocean crust with new ocean crust. That is why the ocean crust that we have today are younger than the continental crust and the rock layers, the 6 mega sequence of rock layers worldwide.
So you think that the magma came up from underneath and kind of pushed the existing waters up?
Now, they both came at the same time. I don't have the map of where the magma was and the water was. The Beijing anomaly is actually at close to the Pacific Ocean, where the catastrophic plate tectonics actually started at the oceans. So the Beijing anomaly not only was predicted and verified, but also its location is precisely as what creationists would expect it to be.
Imagine you have
Wouldn't
a
you expect
continent.
it to be blown up?
Sorry,
Wouldn't you expect it to be emptied of water?
it's too huge. Okay, and when it was rising, magma was also rising with it. Not
So
all,
what?
not all
So
will. not all will be gone, of course. And some of the floodwaters also, after the flood, also drain to the Beijing anomaly area. So we don't expect it to be gone completely.
And what caused these bodies of water to suddenly erupt?
When the flood started, God said He broke open the fountains of the great deep, and when when for example, let's say the Pacific Ocean, all right, the like God said, he actually the only miracle for catastrophic plate tectonics is God breaking up the fountain, the what do you call that again? Sorry for my English. The
Mid-oceanic ridges.
yeah, the oceanic ridges, breaking it apart so that the waters can come out. There's already pressure down there. All you have to do is to crack it, and then these come out.
And you have to consider the fact, like I said earlier, a global flood whose waters erupted from these interconnected worldwide subterranean chambers, as Jeremy was talking about. The energy release would have exceeded the explosion of 300 trillion hydrogen bombs, and would provide a great deal of the floodwater that I mean, you can read it right in Genesis. You know, the fountains of the great deep broke open, the earth is fractured like an eggshell. And we see that. We see evidence everywhere. Go ahead there, Neff.
Well,
So
I would
imagine.
just address something, a very great misconception that people have about the flood. They wonder, where do the waters come from? Where do the waters go? And that's a valid question, because if the waters came out of the earth and flooded the earth, well, then how come the earth is not still underwater? Where do the waters go? Well, it's a very good question. So let me explain the mechanics of that briefly. Those massive amounts of water concealed inside the earth below the crust. And when the crust splits open, the waters come out. Now, if you put a book on top of a balloon filled with water and you take your fingers away from the mouth of the balloon, what happens? Well, the weight of the book pushes the water out of the balloon, and the book drops. That's what happened to the ocean floors of the earth. The water inside the earth, as it came out faster than the ocean floors could sink. So the waters actually covered the earth, and they sloshed back and forth because of massive tsunamis. They went this way, then they came back again, went the other way, then the other way, then the other way, then the other way, and sloshed back and forth, left and right across the continents until the gravity of the earth decided to fill the empty space where the water was inside the earth, and the ocean floors sank. They went down, 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 and the waters, when they abated the continents because the ocean floors gave out, and they flowed like sheets off the continents down into the now deeper oceans. The waters are in our ocean. You've been drinking it. You've been drinking the floodwaters of the ocean all your life. They're in the oceans today because the ocean floor sank. Now, if you want evidence the ocean floor sank, pull up Google Earth and start looking at the edges, zoom in and look at the edges of all the continental the plates around the Earth, and you'll see the massive vertical striations on virtually every continental shelf all the way around all the continents. Those vertical striations are evidence that the continental shelves sank down, and some of those are created by massive sheets of water like rivers flowing off the continents, literally eroding the edge of the continental plate as they float into the ocean at high speed. Now, one of the evidences that process actually took place is called planation surfaces. There are massive areas on the continents of the earth, and some of them a couple of hundred square miles in area, some couple of thousand or several thousand square miles in area, which are literally basically flat. Now, the reason they're flat is because water moving in a massive thick sheet flowed off the continents, and as it did that, it literally scoured the landscape flat and made it flat. And that's called a planation surface, and there are many of them. Some of them are truly huge, thousands of square miles, many thousands of square miles. The American Midwest plains are basically one gigantic planation surface that has been slowly buckled a little bit after the flood left it flat, and that can only happen by rapidly moving water, really rapidly moving water capable of moving boulders hundreds of miles and locking them inside strata, and then the strata form around them, which we find inside mountains, in fact. So where are the waters today? They're in oceans. And why? Because the ocean floor sank, because the waters came out of the earth, leaving vacant space inside the crust, and the gravity of the earth pulled the ocean floors down to fill that empty space, and that's where the waters went. The oceans are twice as deep today as they were before the flood, and the flood waters are in the oceans today.
Monterey
So-
Canyon.
I mean,
Sorry.
ultimately, you invoke magic, so
No, it's no magic. That's
not a very
geology.
satisfying.
That's geology. That's not
Okay,
magic.
so I gotta
It's
point
God
something out. So
breaking the.
I need to point something out. So we
That's
gave
physics.
it's the testable predictions that flow from it anyway. So
Mhm.
if God made the fountains of the great deep, break open, but yet all the testable predictions that are confirmed that flow from that, consistent with all the geologic evidence that we see, and then your only rebuttal is, well, that's magic. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to be convinced by your rebuttal, Taylor, and you obviously don't have any rebuttal to all the evidence we're providing, and all you're doing here is proving how true the Bible is when it talks in 2 Peter 3 that there's going to be scoffers denying three things: the creation, the flood, and the coming judgment. I mean, take a minute and give some actual sound arguments, everything we're saying, because just invoking a rebuttal that says, well, that's magic. I mean, come on, man. Let's act like adults here. And why don't you give some sound arguments against, what I've been saying, Jeremy's been saying, Neff's been saying. Go ahead, take your time.
Yeah, that is an adult response because I'm skeptical of magic. And you said, and Jeremy said that God would break
Okay, so
open the floodgates. So you guys have been going on for like 10 minutes, and I can barely get a sentence in without getting interrupted. So it obviously looks like I can't respond because I'm not being allowed to. So
The Himalayas.
We're giving you a few seconds. Go ahead.
see,
The Himalayas.
Wait, Roddy.
you just proved my point.
Let's let him respond. But before we do,
Himalayas.
Taylor, what I would just point out is the only quote unquote magic that we've posited is God splitting the earth so far. Everything else is just physics. So I don't. But
that's fine.
But go ahead. Let's let Taylor have his time. Let
Himalayas. Taylor, the Himalayas.
Let Taylor have his response.
I don't know what you want me to address about the Himalayas.
How can snail paste plate
just give me your response.
Okay.
How can snail paste plate
Take your time.
So there's several things that don't make sense about it to me because, such as magma and water rushing out together.
Himalayas.
Water. I don't know what you want me to address about the Himalayas. They exist. What do you want me to say?
I told you that snail paste plate tectonics cannot achieve it. I even showed you an example of two cars when they collide.
Here might be a better idea. Maybe we should let Taylor try to tell us since he thinks he knows we're wrong. Taylor, perhaps you could explain with uniformitarian processes, that is, processes that are ongoing and at very slow and steady pace throughout the history of the Earth. Perhaps can you explain to us the geologic features of the Earth that we've described with uniformitarian processes so that we can have reason to believe that the young Earth creation model is false and the uniformitarian model is correct? Can you explain the features of the geology of the Earth that we've been describing with uniformitarianism?
Geologists can, and I'm going to address most of the stuff that you guys have been saying.
Can you? I mean, the geologists are not here. This is you and us.
Yeah, so you just wanted me to address all the stuff you're saying, so allow me to respond.
Start with the Himalayas. I explained it in detail already.
Jeremy, hold on a second, please.
Yeah.
Hold on, brother. I mean, Taylor, we're not dragging. There are no geologists in here.
Oh my God!
Okay?
Let me get to it.
So, can you say we're wrong? Now, if we're wrong, then it must be because you know we're wrong for reasons. Do you know the reasons why we're wrong? That uniformitarianism refutes the things that we're saying. If so, can you please elucidate why we're wrong from the geological point?
It's not just me; it's the geologists. So
Okay, the
they all
geologists are
they
here.
all
Give us
dispute
your
the
argument.
dates that you
Go ahead.
guys.
What is it that they say that demonstrates that we're wrong?
Do you want me to skip over all the stuff that you just were trying to give me time to
Well, I
rebut?
mean,
Yes,
we
yes.
made numerous
You, you, you,
points,
you
and
can bait
maybe
and
you could
switch.
provide an explanation from the secular geology camp about any of the specific points that we made that show that we're wrong.
Yeah, but this is what you guys are doing. You're bringing up subject after subject after subject and letting it pile up, and I can't respond to it. And then you make me respond to the thing that you just brought up when I need to address the other things that you brought up because you're assuming it in the thing that you want me to answer right now.
Okay,
Well, we're
why
just talking about the
don't you address
geological things that we've been speaking
I-
about. Do you know reasons that do you know from secular geology reasons that the arguments we've been making about the features of the earth that we've been discussing that show that we're wrong? Do you know what arguments secular geologists make
I
regarding
know.
the features of the earth that we've been discussing that verify that we're wrong?
This is
I
a
know.
discussion, so allow me to just share my thoughts for a moment.
Oh, hurry up, do it right now. Go.
I'm
Jeremy,
not going to hurry up.
chill
We got
out,
all the
man.
time in the world.
Let him speak, Cherry. Chill out, man.
Okay, so uh, I'm going to start with saying a couple of problems that I have with the your explanation. So at high velocity, cool rock will crack and smash into many different parts. At slow velocity, it can actually bend and have time to melt and warm up. And so we would expect to see basically shards of rock with this explosive power that you're talking about. And addressing the Himalayas, how that addresses that is I would just refer to the geologist because I'm not a geologist. And I understand you're laughing, but that's what they think. And I understand that when these massive things are moving towards one another, the rock that's on the border has nowhere to go. So it either goes down or it piles up.
Do you know the? May I speak? Do you
I'm
know how
done.
dense the mantle is?
What?
Do you know that the mantle is less dense than the?
Yeah. So things can fall
Oh,
through it.
that's all. Sorry.
What?
So solid rock can fall through it.
Yeah. And do you know the speed of catastrophic plate tectonics? Of how fast the subduction happened?
I know that rock cracks at high speeds.
I know. But do you know the speed? Because it depends upon the speed.
No.
Okay. It depends upon the speed. So do you know the speed?
No, you're saying it's very high.
I'm not saying it's very high. I said we never gave any figure.
Didn't you say high velocity?
Yeah, probably 25 to 45 miles per hour, somewhere in there.
Meters per second. For a rock to be cracked, it needs to be more than that. Okay, of course there will be cracks, but not the entirety. Okay, we're talking about the entire pre-flood ocean floor. Of course, some will crack, some will not. Most will not. Okay, they're going down together.
If it cracked in innumerable places, it could still go down, and it would likely have done that. It wouldn't have just broken every 10 miles. It would have broken every 50 feet. You know what I'm saying? So it's like shoving a broken graham cracker down into something at high speed. It breaks up as it goes down in because of the resistance. That doesn't mean it won't go down in. You see what I mean? It might get destroyed going in. That doesn't mean it won't go in.
That is why.
And there are countless examples. If I took a drinking straw and I tried to press it into your forehead, the straw would bend. But if I gave it to Jackie Chan and he snatched it and he pointed it straight at your forehead and popped you in the forehead as fast as he could with a straw, as straight as he could, it would actually puncture it would probably penetrate almost to your skull because it would go in so straight and so fast. The straw, being less dense than the tissue on your skull, it would go straight to your skull because a highly skilled martial art could just snap it right into your skull, even though the straw is less dense than your tissue, right? It's the same principle. You understand that principle, don't you, Taylor? Right?
Mm-hmm.
For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.